I'd like to call this public hearing, Greenhills Village Council, to order. Clerk call the roll, please.
Hermes. Walter. Here. Rees.
Here.
Merle.
Here.
Kovac. Here. Halter. Here. Adams.
Here.
Walterman.
All right. The purpose of this meeting is, as I said, a public hearing is regarding the amendments to the zoning code and zoning map of the village. We'll follow a similar format as we did the last time. We'll have Todd Kinsey from the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission discuss some of the changes and rationale behind it, and then we'll entertain comments from the public. We'll limit those comments to 5 minutes. Just to point out, this is the second hearing. As far as the process is concerned, the Planning Commission is charged with developing potential changes to the zoning code. The Planning Commission held a public hearing back in the summer regarding that. When the Planning Commission is done with their work, they vote to hand this off to the Village Council. It is the Village Council's ultimate responsibility to make decisions to make any changes if they see fit in the document that's been presented to them, and to ultimately pass it or turn it down, as the case may be. At the last meeting, some of the concerns that were voiced were there's strong opposition to development on the west side of Winton Road, and we'll see that in the zoning map. Certainly opposition to multifamily housing in Village Center. Some concerns about fences and privacy fences in the side yard at 6 feet. There was concern expressed at the shopping center as it's become a non-conforming use. There was a comment made that urban farming should be limited to properties that are at least an acre in size. I think that means there's probably 2 in the village that qualify there. And opposition was voiced to restricting the number of pets on one property, and I think that came under the definition of kennels. So, did not have a sign-in sheet tonight, so we'll just, oh, there is a sign-in sheet. Excellent. Excellent. So if you've had the opportunity to sign it, if you wish to make a comment, Terry, back yonder, if anybody wants to sign the sheet, please do. At this point, Mr. Kinsky, I believe I'll turn the floor to you.
Good evening. I don't know if there's people in the audience that were here last time or not. Folks that were, just be a little repetition here.
That's all right.
I want to start off by giving a little background before I go through the changes. Based on some of the comments from the previous hearing, there's a little bit of lack of clarity as to how we got here, meaning how we got here to the point where we're revising all the zoning regulations. Our office, the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission, assisted the village through a very long, comprehensive planning process that many of you were involved with, and some faces in this room I think were involved with as well. And one of the major things that came out of that was the village center concept. Recognition of the fact that there's a limited tax base here in the village, and that is really your only opportunity outside of one parcel, I think, up on Sharon Road, to have non-residential development. We also looked at aging issues and folks being able to stay within the village as they get older, looking at housing options, and that's the reason why we looked at this mixed-use concept. So the the zoning code rewrite started off with, well, first of all, it was identified in the zoning code, or in the comprehensive plan, that the zoning code needs some work. So we started off with an analysis that we did for the village back in June of 2011. And we provided a very long, I think 5 pages of comments of things that were issues, things that need to be revised or updated. The village zoning code dates back to 1949. There was a substantial revision in the 60s, and with the exception of a PUD ordinance that was adopted 5-7 years ago, there's really been very few changes to the zoning code. As a result, the zoning code has a lot of issues. It's outdated in many ways, difficult to use, and there are some fairly significant common things that zoning codes have that your code did not have. And as we went through the analysis and we engaged the law director, I was at the point where I was like, I thought it was going to be easier if we just kind of throw out your existing code and just start over with something new, incorporating all of the things that are in the current zoning code that make sense, that are current, and then update where necessary, bring in new concepts where necessary. And there was agreement that that's the best way to do that. One of the most important things is that the village center district that we've talked about, and there's been a lot of discussion about, was envisioned by the comprehensive plan, is in the comprehensive plan. So I think the suggestion that the planning commission is behaving in a rogue manner or something is a little bit unfair, because there was a lot of public input, significant for any of you were involved, an incredible amount of public input in the shaping of the comprehensive plan. So I just want to give that background for folks who may just be appearing on the scene now and seeing these new regulations. The other thing that I would like to say before I go through the changes is that there seems to be some concern about certain things that are in the code. And the reminder that I would say is that none of these changes go into effect. They all go into effect together. If there are specific things that we need to work on or address or concerns, the council has the ability to make those changes right here. And I would argue, based on my knowledge as a zoning expert, having been doing this for 20 years now, is that your zoning code is really a liability in many ways, the existing zoning code. So, and what we've added is, even if outside of the village center, is an incredible improvement. So, that said, it's kind of, my thought is don't put on the baby with the bathwater kind of concept. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if there are specific issues, this is the time to work through those. Okay, with that, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the major changes to the code, and that'll be here if there's no questions.
When you say major changes, from when to when? Major changes.
The major changes
before
that
the hearing we had, or post?
No change.
Okay. Well, and then I didn't know.
no, I'm reading from the document that I prepared that accompanied the draft. There have been some slight changes through the planning commission, but they were very minor. And in fact, I believe the planning commission voted on those. There was a slight change to the district of the village center, and we made the changes to the RV regulations. I think those were the major items. So, that said, I'll go through this list. These are the major changes from your existing code to what new code would be. Okay, there are a lot of new definitions. There are regulations dealing with adult entertainment uses, which your law director has reviewed and believes are necessary. There is a substantially expanded list of zoning and land use definitions, which your current code does not really contain. There are regulations for outdoor lighting. Currently, there are no regulations for outdoor lighting, minimums or maximums at all. So to deal with, someone who wants to put up a big light, or if you have a parking lot or whatever, who sets the standards for the height, illumination, those kinds of things. Chapter 9 is a new chapter that consolidates all the accessory and temporary uses into one single chapter. Presently, those regulations are scattered throughout the existing code. And there are a number of new regulations for accessory and temporary uses that currently don't exist. For things like urban agriculture, dealing with home daycare, parking of boats, trailers, and RVs, parking, how to deal with inoperable vehicles, the parking and storage of commercial vehicles in residential districts, dumpsters in non-residential districts, temporary uses, things like festivals, contractors' offices, tents. It introduces regulations for pods, the portable storage containers, and also specifies regulations for solar panels. Essentially, none of these regulations exist today. So, for example, one of the heated discussions we had in the Planning Commission was about regulations that were being proposed to regulate the parking of RVs and trailers and whatnot. Presently, there are no regulations. And so the thought, typically what happens is most codes require these if they allow them to be in the rear yard. Recognizing the fact that many yards can't be accessed, many rear yards can't be accessed because of the distance between houses and a large number of houses here in Greenhills, we decided, okay, how are we going to deal with this? So we changed the regulations to say, if you have this, here is how it's regulated. So it says it has to be on a paved surface, it has to be operable, licensed, if that applies or not. It revises some of the regulations for fences, walls, and hedges. It revises the regulations for satellite dishes to comply with the FCC regulations. We've added this new chapter for the village center that would enable the shopping center and the area around it along Winton Road to potentially be, if ever redeveloped, be developed in a mixed-use way that would promote pedestrian orientation. I'm going to stop there for just a second. And the one thing that I think is really important for everyone to know here is when you go introduce a zoning map change, you rezone an area, oftentimes you're rezoning property that is privately owned. And in this case, the vast majority of the land, not all of it, but the vast majority of the land that would be in the village center is owned by the village. So the great thing about that is that if the redevelopment ever occurred, in addition to the zoning code, you can negotiate with them privately. There may be things that aren't in the code, but you can deal with that separately through a sale agreement. So I think that's a very important note in this process. So there's this idea that I heard as I was sitting here before the meeting started that all of a sudden we're going to have Section 8 housing get built potentially around the village center because it will allow multi-family uses. And that just quite frankly is absurd because the village owns the land. So would you do that to yourselves, as someone who's going to sell a piece of land? I mean, common sense has to prevail. So that's a very, very, very critical concern, piece of information that everyone needs to know. Chapter 18 is a new chapter that adds regulations that will allow for the adoption of local historic districts. Presently, there is a national register district, which has nothing to do with zoning, does not control development standards at all, unless you're using federal dollars for something, which is very unlikely here in the village. But what this does, it creates the regulations and creates the ability, so if anyone ever wants to pursue a local designation for a historic district, it can happen. But that would also go through another process, go through public hearings, engaging the neighbors where that would be designated. And it's just putting that in place so that if someone wants to do it, it exists. There's a new chapter that deals with landscaping standards, that deals with buffering and streetscapes. None of that currently exists in your code. There are regulations, specific regulations for parking and loading. It adds the actual design standards, setbacks, requires maintenance, says how it has to be paved, all those kind of things. That doesn't currently exist in the code today. That's kind of amazing. We've added a comprehensive set of sign regulations that addresses all the uses in the village, which currently in the code, there's sign regulations, very limited sign regulations, and certainly not comprehensive at all. And point of clarification here is that there's some First Amendment issues that are currently included in your code, and those are copied word for word. And as I said, that the Planning Unit Development chapter that currently exists today is copied word for word. So there are a number of things like the green belt. None of the language is changing regarding the green belt because that requires a charter amendment to do so. That's word for word. It also, chapter 22 clarifies and modifies the duties of the village council, planning commission, and board of zoning appeals with regard to their role in all of the planning and development review process that is indicated in the code. And then the last thing I want to mention before I sit down is section 22.6 is site plan review standards. These regulations will require and expand the powers of the Planning Commission to review all multifamily and commercial uses. So, so the point here is that if you have a piece of property that's zoned in such a way that it allows commercial, multifamily, or mixed use of those, you not only have to meet the regulations that are in the zoning code, but you have to go through an administrative review by the Planning Commission. So what that means is that there may be some language in the code that addresses design. It doesn't specifically say it has to be designed this way, but it gives the Planning Commission the power to review that, to look at things like roof lines, building materials, and maybe there's something unique to a site that requires some additional requirements. So the powers in the site plan review section are quite broad, and it should give every resident a great deal of comfort that there's going to be extensive review for any use, any new development, whether or not it's a permitted use or not. I guess what I'm saying is that the zoning code represents a vast improvement over what you have today. I think it is a very, very well-written set of development regulations, and it addresses what the comprehensive plan was trying to achieve. So with that, I have no other comments, but if there are questions, I can take those.
Any comments from council at this point? Very well, let's move along with the public hearing. Mr. Willard.
Could I give these to somebody who passed them out? Approximately 4 copies. I left some more copies on the table if someone else wants them. I'll be very quick because I have to be somewhere else in about 4 minutes. Number 1, village center. The village does not control OLR or the property behind the white building. And even the village property owned, controlled by council, only takes 4 members of council to sell a piece of property owned by the village. And while this council may not even consider anything like Section 8 metropolitan housing, we don't know what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years from now. Another question that I want you to look at is regard to your density. Right now, your multifamily dwellings permit about 14.5 units, buildings per acre. I think you might want to consider reducing it to 10 or 11, something of that nature. Because remember, we've got human beings that are going to be living in these apartment buildings, not laboratory rats. So you want more space for a person, not less space. That's something to consider. I think also regard to signage, commercial signage. No one wants in the shopping center a big sign that says Gold Nugget on it, spinning around. On the other hand, the regulations you have in there right now and proposed are too restrictive. People should have illuminated lights in there, the right to have flashing lights, and done in good taste. I've suggested maybe some changes where perhaps they could request a variance where you have some control over what goes in there, but not a blanket denial of illuminating or flashing lights or anything of that nature. Those are just the highlights of what I put in there. And what I gave you, just suggestions. You can scratch them out, do whatever you want with them, or put something in totally different, leave it the way it is. But I just, at least talking points you might want to consider. There's a number of other things I've mentioned in there, and those notes you may or may want to consider as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Wendell Fisher.
I'm Wendell Fisher, I live on Deer Hill Lane. And what I wanted to talk about tonight is your section 9.2, your chapter 9.2, your urban farming or agriculture. I don't know where this chicken idea came from. I talked to 7 neighboring communities. Out of that 7, 5 restrict any chickens unless there's 3 acres or more. Also, I don't see anything that says anything about a health risk associated with breeding chickens and a health risk with the chicken manure. And chickens are on the menu for coyotes, raccoons, birds of prey, hawks, and owls. And you start putting people with chickens up in the center of the village, and you're going to draw those predators up into the center of the village. The other thing is, I noticed in here it was what is considered a small farm animal. You do not designate, is that a goat, is it a miniature horse, is it a pig? There's no designation on that whatsoever. And final thing is, I don't see anything in here where you restrict the use of outside wood burning furnaces. If you've read the Inquirer a few years ago, Cincinnati had quite a problem with those, with adjoining neighbors of the smoke and the stench that comes from.
All right, thank you, sir. Harry Tryon.
Evening. You'll have to bear with me, it's been a long day and I may lose my voice. One of the first things I wanted to point out is the map that is being shown with the zoning code. You showed the PUD for the wet landing as being an R1 with the PUD. I believe that is still an R2 area with the PUD overlay, if I'm correct. And the entire area for the PUD does not take up the entire plot. So I don't know, are we trying to change this along with the zoning here, or is that just a incorrect notation on the map?
It's not this last area we changed. Only the parts with a slash mark are in the areas.
Okay, so it's
Change the, you know,
it's just incorrect.
is that R1 or R2? That's,
Would have to look at
we'll have to take
I
it.
believe it's an R2 is the underlying, and it's just a PUD state overlay on it, and it also
I'll look into
doesn't
that.
take,
Thank you.
it doesn't take up a couple of blocks. Just a general comment on the village center idea. We have already taken out housing to the north of the shopping center district. Sounds like we're looking at taking out the western side of Winton Road, and I know that Councilman Bud Walterman has voiced opposition to including the golf course into the village center. That leaves a lot of historic property, our common, and the Johnny's Toy Store site. I don't believe that the historic areas should be included in a village center. I don't foresee us doing anything with our common in the future other than upgrading it with more plantings and beautiful assets. The OLR church, I think it'll be a long time before that gets developed into anything other than church property. And Johnny's Toys is outside the historic district right now and is redeveloped as that will. I don't think we need a village center zoning district. I'd much rather see us doing some kind of design overlay for those zones that are already existing there. I have not had an opportunity to read all 180 pages of the zoning code, but I have perused through the R2 district in which I live and what would probably affect me. And the first thing I'm looking at is home occupations. I have a home-based office. In this code on page 53, chapter 9.1, it says home occupations may be permitted as a conditional use permit approved by the planning commission. So I take it all of us now that who have home-based offices will have to come and get a permit to do so. It says no external alteration, construction or reconstruction on the premises to accommodate use shall be permitted. So it sounds like we're taking away our privilege to put a small sign up on the front of our house announcing that we have an occupation and that you can come and knock on the front door and ask us about it. It also says under E, only commodities made on the premises may be sold on the premises. So I guess if you're an Avon lady, you can't have your customers come to your house and pick up their things because you're not making those cold creams and perfumes in your kitchen. Okay, minimum lot area in the R2 district. R2 is multifamily. It says that a dwelling unit has to have a width of not less than 65 feet. I live in a 3-bedroom in-unit townhouse, so I have a side yard. I only have 45 feet width. Those units in the middle of my building are only as wide as their 2 bays of structure, which is 24 feet wide. So this doesn't even apply to what is existing in the village right now. We need to look at what's here, what makes up the majority of the historic district and what makes up a large part of the west side of this community. Also, we have lot size requirements where I think we're gonna find that a lot of lots do not meet the requirement in this zoning. Also says multifamily dwellings shall have a front yard setback of not less than 20 feet. I know the 2 middle units in my building are only 14.5 feet from the sidewalk. And I know that there are several other unit buildings in the historic district that don't meet that requirement. Why is that important? Because if you don't meet these requirements, you become non-conforming. If you want to do something to your building, that means you have to get a variance. Also, if there's not enough non-conforming conditions to your house, to the building that you're in, or to your neighborhood, blight can be put upon your neighborhood. Let's see.
Thank you, Mrs. Trine. Time is up.
That's my 5 minutes.
Yes,
Oh
ma'am.
my goodness.
But it gave us a lot to think about, that's
Could I
for sure.
make just one final comment, which is something legal that I think needs to be looked into? Just a quick short one. Will you give me permission?
Please.
On page 166, in regards to planning commission reviewing site plans, it states here that no public notice or public hearing shall be required in conjunction with the review, approval of modifications or disapproval of a site plan. I believe that violates the sunshine law of the state of Ohio for a committee or commission to meet, to vote in majority, and make decisions. So you may want to review that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just add that if you have comments that you didn't have time to get tonight, and you want to supply those in writing, I'd be happy.
I will do that. Thank you.
All right, next up, Peggy Beeler.
I just have a quick question. I know you're not obligated to answer, but I want to throw it out there. If you are confident in these zoning changes and you believe they will benefit the residents of this village, and you were elected to represent the residents of our village, why aren't the residents allowed to have a say by voting for these zoning changes? That's all I want to know.
I believe you will find in the charter, let me put chapter and verse, if I can find it real quick here.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
chapter 11, 15 is the part on amendments. 11.1, 1115.01, power of council to amend ordinances. I mean,
Well, I
it
understand you're
outlines
not
the process.
obligated, excuse me.
No, I'm just saying it outlines
Well,
the process.
it's
they
my
have to
5
follow.
minutes. I understand you're not obligated, but why wouldn't you?
because this was the job that we were elected, or council was elected to perform.
I thought you were elected to represent us.
We are, and that's the,
I don't feel represented.
well, that you have the right to run for office. You have the right to circulate a petition for referendum if you don't agree with the action of council.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right. Judy Huff.
On the screen, you can circulate those and there's stuff right on the back. It pertains. My name is Judy Huff and I live at 50 Hadley Road. While I can appreciate a homeowner's right to use their driveway to park the campers and the vehicles they own, their neighbors and fellow homeowners have a right to a view that does not detract from their property value or the ability to sell their home. Campers and vehicles in good condition that actually run and are occasionally moved are fine and a normal part of every neighborhood that fellow homeowners understand. But vehicles that have flat tires, like the pictures I'm showing you, flat tires, broken windows, expired plates, and cobwebs hanging from them from prolonged inactivity are not acceptable or fair to fellow homeowners. The new zoning code must address this issue. I have reported 66 Hadley to council twice, and I believe Councilman Jeff Halter came out to view the property, yet nothing has been done. We are in the process of updating our zoning codes, which is a good thing, and council has asked for public input, another good thing. My concern and question to council is this: regardless of what finally ends up in our zoning codes, how will they be enforced? I think enforcement is crucial. I did not come out with a review of the problem.
All right. Judith, you went hard.
I'm good.
You good? All right, fair enough. That's it. Anybody else want to say anything?
Just a couple of questions that were raised.
Sure.
I'll start with the RVs because that's what I remember because it was. In the chapter, as proposed, it's in section 9.8. there are a number of things in here, but a few of these, one says, the recreational vehicle shall be maintained, be in good condition and safe for effective performance of the function for what is intended. The exterior of the vehicle shall be intact. It shall be roadworthy. Vehicles that require a license shall be properly licensed, operable, and tagged. So anyway, so the one that you're talking about.
It's not a recreational vehicle, it's two parked cars.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But my point is that what is going to be established for somebody to, I'm a homeowner, I'm upset, I want something done, I call who to get what done, and what recourse do I have to see it gets done, is my question, regardless of what ends up.
We're talking about
in
the
code.
enforcement process.
Exactly.
Judy, let me
Enforcement, yes.
interrupt here for a second. I've called on your street before on a vehicle that was flat tires, inoperable, hadn't moved. I called the police department and they take care of it. They either ticket it or it's towed, and so my recommendation to you would be just call the police department on the non-emergency number.
Okay, and just one question, what if that doesn't work?
Call the manager.
Well, let me, I don't know if your police department, typically they deal with things that are in the right of way.
This is parked on the public street.
She's speaking more of the one she's concerned with is in the driveway.
In the driveway, then that's a code.
Yeah, and that's
That's a
the whole
zoning.
point.
And that, there's two different,
I mean,
it's on the street, it's a police issue.
who is the body that is going to say, because you have this written very nicely that says if it's operable and it's got license plates and other, who decides where this one is okay, but this one has got too much rust and is an eyesore? Who makes those decisions?
Good enforcement, and it's, you know, it's kind of tough to say you're junker. I mean, if the junker runs and people drive it to work, you know, for.
Yeah, well, that's good though.
For
It's a
better, for
start.
ill, you know, that's, if it functions, yeah.
But there will be such a committee, there'll be, who will say,
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'll report that address to the code enforcement officer for them to take action.
we have a code enforcement officer?
Yes,
Cool.
we contract with the National Inspection Corporation, they do our code enforcement as well as our building.
Okay.
I'll get a spec.
I'll make sure they get on it.
I think I think his question is who is it? I mean, you have a company or a person or?
Yes.
We have a company.
Yeah.
Full-time, part-time?
They're here as much as we need them to be here.
The one I think I wanted to address, actually did two things, think about it. One is the comment on page 166 about the notice. It says no public notice or public hearing shall be required. And what, maybe it's not written clear enough. I talked about this with the law director. And what that means is that there's no requirement to send a notice to the neighbors. And there's no requirement to schedule a public hearing. Of course, if the planning commission meets, they
It's
have
gotta
to
be a public
you
meeting,
have to
so
have a
that
public
language probably needs to
yeah,
be.
we can address that. What that's basically saying is that you don't have to send notices to everyone. I mean, it's an administrative review. The issue is that when you do an administrative review and it appears like a public hearing, then you can't really have a discussion with the applicant about how to change it to make, improve it, and it becomes a public hearing, which is really not what the site plan review process is about. So that's why it's not really specifically set up to engage the public in a discussion. If you want to change that, that's fine, but we can address those words, fix them so that it's more clearly written. And then the last thing I'm going to say is about the chicken issue. I'm a planner. I'm going to, for the last 5 years, every planning conference I go to, every time there's zoning discussed, chickens is the #1 thing at the top of the list. Everyone wants chickens, okay? I live in Northside and on lots as smaller than many lots here in Greenhills, and I have 3 neighbors within 2 blocks who have chicken coops, and you don't know they're there. So, can there be a nuisance if someone's not cleaning it up? Of course. That becomes a health department issue. But I would just argue that we have standards saying that they have to be in an enclosed enclosure with a roof on it, and you don't have someone who is, being a nuisance to the neighbors because they're not cleaning up and whatnot. They really are a very innocuous use. I mean, I literally have a neighbor who's like 3 doors away, you don't know they're there. So it's really not a big deal, quite frankly. And they're doing it, they have chickens in Montgomery, chickens in Amberley Village just passed a huge ordinance a few weeks ago. They're doing McCoy Township. They're all over city Cincinnati, all over the place. So it's one of those things where just because of there's kind of this return to the earth kind of thing, and people want to keep bees and they want to make bread and sell things out of their house and whatnot. And chickens is one of those things. So we had a very robust discussion about at the very beginning of this whether or not we wanted to include those things or not. So all I would say is that if you're worried about it before you vote on it, I can give you some addresses you can visit. It's fairly innocuous.
And also, isn't it true that there are some people keeping chickens now?
Yes, there are, and we have no regulations to control it.
And if I could just, we're done with the chicken conversation. I think, Judith, you bring up a good comment that people need to know how to get things done. And I'd like to see us maybe have a section on the website where, under maybe contact or someplace where you could know what the methodology is. Because we had a car on Farragut that was flat tire rust, ended up being a police enforcement thing, and that was taken care of. But it's you're talking to somebody different when it's on someone's property.
Right.
But, without enforcement, this is all futile, if we don't enforce what we're doing. And I think that more than ever it's being enforced. I've seen some changes that I think, I know are code violations. It's happening on a regular basis. There's an ongoing list. I think some really good things are happening. Are all the boxes checked yet? No, I don't think so. But it's important for you guys to know who to talk to, how to get something done that needs to be done in the proper way. So we'll try to get that on the website, or if you've got a recommendation on a better way to do it, please let us know.
Oh, and by the way, home occupation, they would not have to, any existing home occupation would not be required to come down and go through the process. It would be existing use. Essentially, it would be grandfathered, but they're permitted, they're conditional. So, only someone who wanted to do home occupation would be subject to that.
Well, I think there are a lot of things we need to discuss regarding that.
I had one other comment. Someone made a comment about outdoor wood burning furnaces. And there's nothing in the zoning code with regard to that, but in our fire prevention code, we adopt and incorporate by reference the Southwest Ohio Fire Safety Council Unified Fire Code. And there are restrictions on outdoor burning and indoor burning within that code.
Yeah, these are an interesting, well, for many of the properties, I knew a little bit about this, and I actually I didn't think it'd be really applicable here in Greenhills, so I didn't put it here, but the one thing is because of fire issues, we really get building permit that these devices have to be a certain distance from the house. So what you end up seeing is they can't really fit on the side of the building. So what they would end up doing is they build this little building in the back of the yard, and it's basically a big boiler, and that's what it is. You're using wood, and you're using the steam, and it comes in, and basically the heat comes in your house. I guess knowing the size of lots that are here in the village, I figured it would be unlikely to be there.
I have seen it more often in the combined commercial now. It looks like a outhouse.
Looks like a little outhouse.
And that could be, with us being so close together, that could be a real issue.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good area to take into consideration.
Thank you. Members of council, any comments?
I'd just like to thank everyone that provided comments. You've given us additional things to think of. We spent a long, long time on this. We're not rushing this process. We'll consider everything that was said. There's nothing set in stone right now. We can change everything or nothing or somewhere in between. Or like you, our house values are affected just because we're your neighbors. We want the right to use our properties, but we also don't want to have to look at something that is an eyesore that adversely affects our properties. And at the end of the day, there's going to be 6 folks that vote on this. This is, most of the time when we vote on something, it's a single issue. Do we spend money on this or not spend money on this? Do we adopt this ordinance with